Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Jason with Pastor Dave, and I'm asking questions, and he's giving answers. And hey, Dave, the question I have today concerns false gods. We've read it, we've heard messages about these false gods, and even Ten Commandments. God says, "You'll put no other god before me." So there has to be something else out there that's being used or chosen by people. What are these false gods? What's he talking about? Who are these false gods that our God is referencing
Right.
when he makes these statements?
Right. The Lord talked about that He's the only God, and He says, "I know of no other." There is only one God, the one true God of heaven and earth, the Creator of heaven and earth. So a false God is the idea of. It comes down to the definition of God. God isn't His name. God isn't how you would reference Him in the sense of identifying Him as apart from everything else. God is a title that you would give. Maybe a simpler way to look at it is it's a title that you would give to something that really pushes your buttons. It's what keeps me moving. It's for me to live is, and Paul says, for me to live is Christ. The idea of a God really is what is the mastering passion that gets you out of bed and gets you cooking in the morning and moving along. And God's coming in that sense of that definition. There is no true God in the sense of other than the one true God of heaven and earth.
Yeah.
But then there's these other mastering passions you have to accept. And so there's various forms of things that people have given themselves over to, and it's what really is becomes the passion of their life. Whether it be the God of sex, where some people, you got to admit, and they have to admit that that's really what they think about all the time. It's what gets them out of the bed. It's what moves along in their intellect. It's reason. It's me being able to study it out. It's me being able to come up with conclusions. I don't need anything else. I have my reasoning. And so the God of the intellect. And then you've got mammon, of course, which is money and positions and power and positions and companies and all that people live for. They just strive on that stuff. And then there's various gods of the Old Testament that they at least went so far to name them, and they parallel everything that are the passions in the heart of man, and it hasn't changed.
Right.
Thousands of years, the same passions.
Yeah.
The god of Ashtoreth, it's an Old Testament god. You'll see it in different names in different cultures, but basically Ashtoreth was just the goddess of fertility, and it had to do with sex. And so sex, it was deified in cultures of people, especially in the days of the history of Israel, and before the coming of the Lord and all. And so you find the gods of Baal, the gods that people would worship. That's the intellectual. It's actually had to do more with nature, weather, crops. That's Baal in the sense of it's the Lord of various facets of the natural world, and so I fall back on my nature. And the idea is then I deify my intellect, and so that tends to be the idea behind Baal, the god of mammon, the money, and all. And Molech is a god in the Old Testament, which is the god of pleasure. It's the idea of wanting to live your life without a lot of strings attached and a lot of commitment. It's the idea of living for yourself.
Just
really.
having fun.
It's the meism of
Yeah.
our day. And so you begin to realize, wait a minute, this culture is no different than any culture that's ever lived. It's in the heart of man that there's certain things that we hold to being God, and that becomes our gods. And so they're false gods in the scriptural sense, and they're driving people to a place where they're going to reap what they weren't expecting. That's going to come up with emptiness and sorrow. And the Lord really summarized all the gods that men choose other than the one true God in John chapter 3, where he said that light has come into the world, but men love their darkness rather than light, and so they will not come to the light. And the idea is that men love their darkness. So really, anything outside of God is just the reason why they're not coming to God is because they're hanging on to some God, some passion, and Jesus just simply calls it all darkness. You're hanging on to your darkness. You love your darkness rather than the light, and so you won't come to the light. And really, that's the story behind people. Although they may be so intellectual, they may have all sorts of oodles of reasoning that they think they have to not bow their knee and follow after the one true God, the only God. But then when you really get down to it, they love their darkness. They love some facet of these little gods that this world offers. It's either sex, or it's your intellect, or it's your money and position and power, or it's just simply the pleasures of life. But nonetheless, those are the gods of the Old, and that's the gods of the New Testament. It's the gods of the heart of man.
Yeah. So this is kind of a tough one because it requires all of us to do kind of an internal investigation, an evaluation of our own hearts to see if we might be individually dabbling in any of these false gods. And I can say that it's been struggles, because you pursue money, you pursue pleasure, you pursue things. But the question is that getting in front of your relationship with the one true God? And that's where the line gets drawn in the sand. And I think that Dave gave us some great explanations as to what these gods are and what they have the potential of doing. So as you move forward, do a little investigation in your own heart and see if some of these false gods might reside there. And there is a way away. There is a way out of that darkness, and that's choosing that light that Pastor Dave talked about. Hey, if you got any questions or comments, add them to the video. We appreciate you joining us, and God bless.